What is up, everybody? This is Adam. Welcome back to Fouled Out. Happy Super Bowl Sunday. I hope you're all ready for the big game tonight. If you are not, you can go back and check out Wednesday's podcast where Matt and I broke down the Super Bowl matchup between the Chiefs and the Eagles. Gave you everything to look forward to tonight. Should be a really fun game, and I'm really excited to watch it. I am dropping in on a Sunday because I had a special request from my dad to do a NBA trade deadline podcast. I wasn't going to do one this year because the trade deadline is usually pretty quiet and Matt and I haven't switched over to the NBA yet. But man, it was a wild deadline. I think one of the craziest and most historically significant deadlines we've ever had. And we'll talk about why here in just a minute. But if you don't know, I talked to my dad about almost everything, especially in the world of sports, especially with Boston sports, with the Patriots and the Red Sox and so and so. He never wants to talk NBA. So absolutely anything I can do to get my dad more interested in the NBA so that we can talk about that as well. I'm happy to do it. And that's why we're here today. So this one's for you, Dad. Let's go. All right, we are back. I am flying solo today, which I hardly ever do on the main feed. I do it on Patreon pretty often. So, Matt, if you're listening to this, I miss you, buddy. I'll talk to you on Wednesday when we are back to break down the results of Super Bowl 57. But trade deadline talk, like I said, a historically significant trade deadline. Typically, when we're coming up on the trade deadline in the NBA, we see a lot of rumors, a lot of projections of guys who could go here, and everybody starts getting really excited. There's a lot of buzz. But what typically ends up happening is like the biggest name to move is like a Nikola Vucevic or Aaron Gordon, not someone the level of Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant is probably a top 15, top 20 all-time player. Guys like that just don't get traded. They don't. The last time that we saw someone who is a consensus top 20 player get traded was when Shaq got traded from the Lakers to the Heat back in 2004. So it's been almost 20 years since we've seen something like this. And when we do see something like this, it never happens in season, ever. The timing of this is insane. Like, we're talking about a Brooklyn team who's currently sitting in the 5th seed in the East, trading away one of the greatest players of all time and a guy who's still in his prime and still playing incredibly to another contender over in the West, and basically giving up on a season where, were they favored to win a championship? No, but when you have Kevin Durant, you always have a chance. And they're punting on that chance because things have gone so south in Brooklyn. So that's the big trade. We're going to start with that one. Kevin Durant gets traded to the Suns for Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, Jay Crowder, and 4 future first-round picks. Jay Crowder then flipped to the Milwaukee Bucks for 57 second-round picks. Who cares? So this actually, like I said, the timing of this is really weird. It all started last summer when we started hearing buzz that Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant were no longer happy in Brooklyn. When that happened, the Suns emerged as a serious contender to get him. And I think that this deal is the deal that Brooklyn wanted to do at that time, because you're getting back some really good young players in Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson. Especially Mikal Bridges, I'm a huge fan of, and I think Cam Johnson's got a little more ceiling that we haven't seen yet as well. You're getting the 4 future first. It's a great price for any player. And it's, I think there probably is some people out there saying that maybe it's not even enough for Kevin Durant, but it's a good price. And I think they wanted to do it last summer, but the Jazz getting 5 players and 5 picks for Rudy Gobert, who, in my estimation, is not even a top 25 player in the league currently, just completely screwed the trade market and brought everything to a screeching halt. Because all of a sudden, you got this great package in place for Kevin Durant. You're really excited. You're like, okay, it sucks that we have to trade KD. You never want to be in that position, but if we're going to, at least we're going to get some good pieces back. We're going to start rebuilding and get a good young team. And now all of a sudden, the Jazz are getting a king's ransom for Rudy Gobert. And you can't trade Kevin Durant for less than that. when he is infinitely better than Rudy Gobert at basketball. So that happens, and no one can make a deal because all the players who are still out there for trades are all better than Rudy Gobert. And so if I'm the Nets at that point, I'm saying, well, I can't give them to you for 2 players and 4 picks. Look what the Jazz just got for Rudy Gobert. And all the other teams are saying, are you crazy? That's just a horrible trade on the Timberwolves' part. We are not giving you that for anyone because that's one of the highest amounts of compensation that a team has ever received for any player. And the fact that it was Rudy Gobert is like mind boggling to people. So the trade market screeches to a complete halt. And they can't make this deal at that time. Now we got to wait and we got to try to get as far away from this as we can so that this trade is not compared to the Rudy Gobert trade. And it's still going to be, but when that Gobert trade is not as fresh, I think it gives the front office of the Brooklyn Nets a little reprieve of like, oh my God, I can't believe that's all you got for Kevin Durant when Rudy Gobert went for so much. And I think we're going to look back at that Gobert trade and just say like, it's a one-off. It was a horrible idea for the Timberwolves and it hasn't really panned out for them this season. And that players aren't going to typically go for that much. Like the Kevin Durant price seems right with what we've seen with guys like Anthony Davis getting traded to the Lakers. Like it's probably appropriate, right? So they get away from that and they take it all the way to the deadline. They play half the season with Durant and they just say like, okay, if we can't get a good deal for him this season, we'll just play it out and we'll try to win a championship maybe. Would they have? No, probably not. But you have Kevin Durant, so you got to try. We get all the way to the deadline. Suns ownership changes from Sarver to Matt Ishbia, who just took over after all the Sarver drama this year. And Ishbia says, why are we not doing this? We have Devin Booker, who's one of the best young players in the league. We have Chris Paul, who's aging. He's kind of on his last legs here, last like really tail end of his prime. If we're going to go for this, we got to go for this. And Kevin Durant is a top 15 all-time guy. Like bring him in. What are we even doing here? So they go out, they get him, and now they're automatically one of the favorites to win the NBA championship. So when something historic like this happens, I like to kind of look back at the context and like the history of the teams because I am an NBA history nerd. And that's actually, if you guys listen to the podcast, my nephew Marshall in the last year or so has recently gotten super into the NBA. And one of the most fun parts about that is like talking about NBA history with him because it's just one of my favorite things in all sports. So looking back on this for Brooklyn, this went from probably being the most excited we've ever been about the Brooklyn Nets to being a completely unmitigated disaster in less than 4 seasons. And it's just kind of par for the course for a team that seemingly just keeps going all in, trying to be relevant, and it just keeps ending in complete disaster. Like right before the 2019 season, Brooklyn has this really fun, young, scrappy team. It's D'Angelo Russell, Jared Allen, who I'm a huge fan of, Karis LeVert, all these guys. And all of a sudden, there's rumors during the All-Star break that Kyrie and KD want to go there. And it's like, oh, man, when you have the chance to do that, you always do that. You always bring in Kevin Durant, no matter what you have to do. And I just don't think that anybody would have ever projected it would have ended like this. So in 3.5 seasons, Kevin Durant ended up playing a total of 126 games for the Nets. That is extremely low. He never played more than 56 games in one season with them. And in those years that Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving were in Brooklyn, they won a total of 7 playoff games. 7 games. And it just adds to this like brutal history of the Nets. They just seem to be a franchise that repeatedly goes all in, makes these splashes, and it blows up in their faces. As a reminder, I'm sure any Nets fans listening to this know this very well, but in 2013, they traded a package of 3 players, 3 first-round picks, and a pick swap to Boston for aging stars Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett. That version of the Nets would play together for about a season and a half and just basically just have a second round and a first-round exit. And what happened to those picks? Those picks were used by Boston to get Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, which is going to be the basis for Boston to be a championship contender for the next 10 years at least. And if you look at the Nets history, like you really have to go all the way back to the early 2000s, about, probably over 20 years ago to find the last time they were relevant and talk about one of my favorite teams from my childhood, and that's the 2001 to the 2007 Nets. Super fun. They had Jason Kidd, Richard Jefferson, Kenyon Martin, and Kerry Kittles. That team made the Eastern Conference Finals 5 out of 6 years and made the NBA Finals twice, losing both of those, one to the Lakers, one to the Spurs. And it's just like a brutal history. you know, they have this great stretch of success from 2001 to 2007. Then they're completely irrelevant until they move to Brooklyn. And Mikhail Prokhorov, the owner at the time, goes all in on bringing Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett over from the Celtics to play with Deron Williams and all these guys they had at that time. That team completely fails because those guys were so over the hill at that point. And then they have to sit for years and just watch Boston accumulate talent using those picks. Like they were unprotected picks. Boston has all of them. And they got to watch like Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. And it's like, oh my God, I can't believe we could have had one or both of those guys potentially. Then it's like manna from heaven. 2019, Kevin Durant wants to come play for your team in Brooklyn, who's never signed a massive free agent like that before. And he's bringing Kyrie Irving with him, who super enigmatic, but really talented guard. And they want to bring their buddy, James Harden. And so you make this huge deal to trade all these picks for James Harden, along with Jared Allen. And you got these three guys, and you're like, man, if they can stay healthy, we can win a championship. They don't stay healthy. You have the Kevin Durant toe on the line game against the Bucks, which is probably the high point of this version of the Nets, which is like a 7-game series where you lost in the second round being the high point of the Kevin Durant Nets. Let that sink in. And now, less than 2 seasons later, you're having to trade all these guys away. You had to trade James Harden away last year. You got to trade Kyrie Irving away this year. And now the final blow, you got to trade away Kevin Durant. It is absolutely brutal. But the one thing I will say for them is that I think that they now have a really fun roster. You got Dinwiddie, Cam Thomas, Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, like all these young, fun guys. Ben Simmons is there, and he's kind of like the turd in the punch bowl because he's the guy where it's like, man, if Ben Simmons could just pan out to be the guy that people thought he would be when he was drafted, this team might be a really good team. Now they're probably a play-in team, maybe a little frisky, like a little fun, but I could see them winning a play-in game and then getting absolutely boat raced by the Boston Celtics or the Milwaukee Bucks. Like someone is just going to destroy them, and that's just going to be the end of this era for Brooklyn. On the other side, like I said, the Suns, one of the best, if not the best duos in the NBA now between Kevin Durant and Devin Booker. Not to mention they still have Chris Paul and DeAndre Ayton on that team. Ayton, I'm kind of meh on, but when he's good, he's good. But speaking of history, like this is a franchise that has a history of putting together super fun, super talented teams that just can't get the job done. Even in the last couple of years, the current Devin Booker led version of the Suns, you made an NBA Finals, you lost, and then you're the best team in the league by far last year, and you have this horrible upset loss to Luka Doncic and the Mavericks. Going back to the mid-2000s, another one of my favorite teams from my youth, the Steve Nash and Amari Stoudemire Suns, just one of the most fun teams of all time, a team that was super ahead of their time as far as how they played basketball. Just couldn't get it done. Couldn't get over the Spurs. Never made a finals. Going back even further in the 90s, it's Charles Barkley, it's Kevin Johnson, it's Jason Kidd, it's Dennis Johnson. Go back further, Tom Chambers, Alvin Adams, Jeff Hornacek, like all sorts of all-stars, all sorts of super fun versions of the Phoenix Suns have come through Phoenix in the last, 50 years since the inception of the franchise. And although they've come so close so many times, they just haven't gotten it done. And so you got to look at this and be like, man, is this it? Is this finally the team that can bring a championship to Phoenix? And like I said, anytime you have Durant, automatic championship contender. When Booker is your second banana, like that is elite status throughout the history of the NBA. Like Devin Booker is going to be one of the best second bananas we've ever seen. But they have some health concerns. Like I said, KD hasn't played more than 56 games in the last 4 seasons. So he misses his first year in Brooklyn with the Achilles tear, recovers. He plays like 56, 33, 30, and granted, some of it's because of COVID, some of it's because of load management, but this is not a guy who's played a lot of games in the last 4 seasons. You got him, you got Chris Paul, who's kind of at the end of his prime, maybe a little bit past his prime, but still playing decent. But he's looked old at points this season. Booker has missed a significant amount of games this season because of injury. So nothing is guaranteed here. In my estimation, I still think that the Boston Celtics should probably be the championship favorite right now with what we've seen so far this season. But the Suns are definitely up there now with the Celtics, the Bucks, the Nuggets, the Grizzlies. They're in that class. They're in the tier 1 of contenders in the NBA now. And I think that's the most you could have asked for at this trade deadline, because it's been a really disappointing season for them so far. And now you're all of a sudden you're injecting Durant into this team, and we'll see how it goes. It's going to take some time probably for these guys to learn how to play together. But man, like Kevin Durant, one of his superpowers is that he can play with anybody. He's like the ultimate fit through NBA history. He fits with literally any other player. Like we even saw him make a NBA Finals with Russell Westbrook. So just think about that. So I'm not worried about the fit. I'm a little worried about health, and then we'll see. But this team now has the highest ceiling of any team in the NBA. All right, second topic I wanted to talk about, speaking of contenders or fake contenders, the Los Angeles Lakers completely rebuilt their lineup around LeBron James within the last week and a half as well. Basically, they ship out Russell Westbrook, a 27 first, and some other stuff, nothing super significant, like Thomas Bryant, Juan Toscano Anderson, nothing crazy. And they get back D'Angelo Russell, which is hilarious to me because LeBron James has already shipped him out of LA to try to win a championship. Malik Beasley, Jared Vanderbilt, and then in a separate deal, they get Mo Bamba and try to recreate this team around LeBron. I think that the big team, like the big market media bias is showing. I was reading an article on The Score. If you guys don't know what that is, there's a sports score app called The Score that I use. And the article was like the post-trade deadline power rankings, and seeing how all these teams have changed since the deadline. They had the Lakers going from 21st in their power rankings all the way up to 10th after this trade. And I'm looking at that. I'm watching ESPN talk about the buzz around the Lakers. I'm listening to other podcasts talk about like how this is a huge coup for the Lakers and that they're now a contender all of a sudden. I just feel like I'm taking crazy pills here. Like, does anybody else feel this way? That they got better, yes, but they were 25-31, 13th in the West. They're not even in a play-in spot. And I'm supposed to believe that D'Angelo Russell, Malik Beasley, and Jared Vanderbilt make them a championship contender. I think that the reason we see narratives like this is mostly because of LeBron, for two reasons. One, I think there are still people out there who think that as long as you have LeBron, you're a championship contender. And I just don't think that's true in 2023. I think it was true for a very long time, but I think that opinion still exists where it's like, oh, well, you got LeBron, you're automatically a championship contender. But I'll remind you that the Lakers didn't even make the playoffs with LeBron last year. And the year before, they were a 7 seed and got eliminated by Phoenix in the first round. So I just don't think that's true. And I think there's a couple guys that you can say that about. There's LeBron James, Kawhi Leonard, too. Like, people are like, oh, well, the Clippers, they got Kawhi Leonard, could be a championship contender this year. I think we need to move on from that perspective. The second reason that the media is very hyped on the Lakers, in my opinion, is that everybody wants to be on LeBron's good side because LeBron watches all this shit. And like, if you don't spin the narrative that LeBron wants you to spin and you're not like a LeBron guy, then you're not getting stories and you're getting froze out. So like networks like ESPN, who need that content, they have to have all their guys kind of going in the same direction, being like, oh man, this is great. The Lakers they're going to be so good. They're definitely a playoff team and a championship contender now because they have LeBron and these other guys. I don't understand how this team is going to play perimeter defense with D'Angelo Russell and Malik Beasley out there and LeBron. And they're like, oh, we got Rui Hachimura too. Like, it's a really strange team to me. And it's not like people are like, oh yeah, well, look at the bubble Lakers. It was LeBron and Davis dominating and all the role players around them got really hot. That team was really, really good on defense. Rajon Rondo, Alex Caruso, Contavious Caldwell Pope, like lots of really good wing defenders and good 3-and-D guys. D'Angelo Russell does not play defense. Malik Beasley, not an elite defender. Rui Hachimura on the perimeter. Like, what are we doing? And besides that, Anthony Davis and LeBron James, not the same guys they were 3 to 4 years ago. Sorry to say, I'm sorry for Lakers fans, but I don't look at this team and be like, that's a championship contender. I can name 6 to 8 teams in the West that I would pick over them. And that's just in the West. I'm not even thinking about like the Celtics and the Bucks and some of these other teams in the East that are better than them as well. So hard disagree from me. Yes, they got better and maybe they'll make a push to be in a play-in game, but eh, like that. Are we supposed to be excited about a play-in game for the Los Angeles Lakers? Um, the only other thing I'll really say about that is that maybe there's a little addition by subtraction there because Russell Westbrook was miserable there and everybody hated him. He was just kind of sitting there collecting his $47 million or whatever the hell they had to pay him at the end of that contract. And I'm super interested to see what happens with Russ now. He's not going to play for the Utah Jazz. He hates Utah. And if you remember, it wasn't that long ago, he had an issue with a fan there yelling racial slurs at him during a game. So he will not suit up for the Jazz. That's not happening. He'll probably accept a buyout from them. And then it's like, okay, he still has something to offer to a contender, I think. But is he going to be able to swallow his pride, take like a vet minimum and go play on a contender and probably come off the bench? Or he's in the last year of his deal. Is he going to go somewhere where he can start racking up stats like he did for the Wizards? Like, is he going to go back to Washington and start putting up triple doubles again? I'm super interested to see what happens with that because he's trying to get another deal next season. And also, he's on my fantasy team, so I prefer the latter. Go put up those triple doubles, Russ. Let's go. Last big trade I wanted to tackle, and then we'll talk about a few small trades real fast, a little rapid fire. Kyrie Irving to the Mavericks for Spencer Dinwiddie, Dorian Finney-Smith, a future first-round pick, and then some seconds as well. I've seen people, like especially on Reddit, panning this trade. And I'm going to zag on that. I actually really, really like this for the Mavs. I did a huge thing during the playoffs on this podcast last year about how the Mavericks had essentially created cap hell around Luka. Kind of one of the problems with having someone like Luka, someone who is so incredible so quickly in the NBA, is that it really accelerates your timeline right away. And what I mean by that is like, think about someone who I think is going to be incredible, Cade Cunningham in Detroit. He didn't like come in and start winning the Pistons a ton of games right away like Luka did for the Mavericks. So the Pistons get another high pick in Jaden Ivey to pair with him. Then Cade gets hurt this year. They're going to have another really high pick, potentially like Wembanyama, Scoot Henderson, or even if it's someone that's not as elite. You're pairing like, okay, now we got like 3 years of really good picks in a row. Look at the Celtics. You got Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Really high picks in a row. When you're building a championship contender, you kind of don't want to get too good too fast because you want to have like the elite players to pair together. Luka comes in, starts winning a bunch of games for the Mavericks. They don't have their first round pick that first season because they traded it to get Luka, which you do a million times out of a million because he's absolutely incredible. And then all of a sudden you're good and you're not getting high first round picks. So like, how do you build around him? They take a swing on Kristaps Porzingis and give him a massive deal. And then they have like massive deals for like Tim Hardaway. They trade Porzingis when it's not working out. And they have, $20 million on the books for Dinwiddie and $15 million for Dorian Finney-Smith, who like, yeah, good defender, decent 3-and-D player. But like, is he incredible? Is he the guy you like your third guy around Luka? No. They have huge deals for all these guys. And it's like, man, they're already overcommitted for this season on cap space and they can't make any improvements. The projected cap for next year is about $134 million. And you had $143 million on the books already, basically just to have the same team that you trotted out the last 2 seasons. So I think something had to be done. especially because if you are a member of the Mavs organization right now, you need to eat, sleep, and breathe Luka's happiness. Your entire life needs to be dedicated to making Luka happy, basically, because he is your meal ticket for the next 10 to 15 seasons, as long as you keep him happy. And the day that he wakes up and goes, you know what? I don't really think I want to be here anymore. Your franchise is fucked. You're in massive trouble the day that he wakes up and says, I'm not really feeling it. And that's the problem with these NBA guys is like they are so fickle, and it's like, man, they have so much pressure to win right away that he could just wake up tomorrow and be like, I don't want to be here anymore. I need you guys to trade me this offseason. And then you're all the way back to square one. So you're in this really bad situation where you can't improve your team around Luka, and you need to, not only because you're wasting his window by having him play with these guys, but also just because like you have to make him happy. So how do you do that? You take a big swing. And so they go out, they get Kyrie Irving because he's the most talented player they can get with the limited amount of assets that they have. And you pair him with Luka, and it's basically a 4 to 5 month experiment at this point. Like, can these guys play together? Do they like playing together? And if Kyrie causes issues, or if the answer is no, they don't like playing together, they can't play together, guess what? He's a free agent and you're getting money off the books. Basically, by making this trade, you freed up about $35 million in cap space next season, a season where you were going to have zero cap space. So even if this doesn't work out for them, all of a sudden you have more flexibility to change your roster around Luka Doncic for the first time in basically his entire time in Dallas. On the other hand, if it does work out, now you have the space to re-sign Kyrie long term if this is what you guys decide you want to put together. How's it going to go? I have no idea. It could be an absolute disaster, just like almost everywhere else Kyrie's been in the last 5 seasons or the last 7 seasons or his whole career. But on the off chance that the experiment works, all of a sudden you've added a super talented guy next to Luka Doncic, because you can say whatever you want about Kyrie. The only thing I will not let you say is that he's not a talented basketball player, because he is very much so that. And if it doesn't work, bye. Goodbye, Kyrie. Go sign somewhere else. Go play with the Lakers next season with LeBron. Have fun. Now we have flexibility. Finally, the thing that you needed the most. And really all you gave up to get it is Dorian Finney-Smith, who, like, yeah, he's fine. I think people have a higher opinion of him than I do. And you gave up a 2029 unprotected first, which, could be really bad down the road, but who cares if you're the general manager of the Mavericks? Because if you don't keep Luka happy and keep him there through 2029, you're not going to have a job anyway. So I like the deal. I like the chance. I like taking a bite of the apple. I like swinging for the fences here when you have Luka, and then going into the offseason and being like, okay, now we have cap space. Now we have a couple expiring contracts that we can trade to bring some guy in. What can we do? Let's get creative. Let's start making some moves and putting the guys around Luka that we need to put around Luka. All right, last couple quick hitters before we sign off and let you guys enjoy your Super Bowl Sunday. The Pistons maybe get James Wiseman from the Warriors in a 4-team deal. This is still kind of up in the air because Gary Payton too, getting traded from the Trailblazers to the Warriors, was part of this deal. And now there's some concerns with his physical. So I don't know that we have resolution on this one yet. But the Pistons are getting James Wiseman, who was the second overall pick in the draft not that long ago. And they're shipping out Saddiq Bey to the Hawks in this deal. The Hawks send picks elsewhere, and there's some other minor players. But the thing I wanted to focus on was that Troy Weaver, the GM for the hometown Pistons, basically trades Saddiq Bey away and gets James Wiseman. Kind of confused about the Pistons trade deadline. Sure, like if Matt and Devin are listening to this, that they'll agree here. But I like the idea of getting James Wiseman, who I think you could argue is a distressed asset. He was a super talented guy, obviously talented enough to get picked second overall in the draft within the last 5 years. And he hasn't panned out at all in Golden State. So I like taking the chance on that guy. But I wonder if that's enough for Saddiq Bey. I think Saddiq Bey is a little overrated by Detroit fans. because he's kind of fallen off a little bit since his rookie season, but he's kind of like the perfect type of guy you want on your team in 2023 as a role player. He's 3-and-D guy. He can score. His defense has fallen off, but I still think there's some potential there for that to get better, especially like in a better system where he has better players around him, which might not happen with the Hawks. But I think like I would have really liked to have Sadiq Bey on the Kings, my team. But I do like getting Wiseman. The thing that confuses me about it is not really the value so much because I can understand taking on the distressed asset for Sadiq Bey. But I think the indications have kind of been that the Pistons want to be a playoff team next year. They didn't trade away Bojan Bogdanovic, who is like a kind of an older vet who seemed like the perfect trade chip for them if they were going to keep rebuilding. And that's honestly like when I saw the Pistons got James Wiseman, I thought that was going to be the deal. It was like Wiseman to the Pistons for Bogdanovic back to the Warriors, and you figure out the salaries. Sadiq is better than James Wiseman right now and probably will be next season. So like keeping Bogdanovic, but then getting rid of Bay and then bringing in Wiseman, who is more of like a rebuilding piece than a competing piece next season, unless he really pops off. And it was a little confusing what they're doing. They kind of have like one skate on both rails, so to say. Like they're dual pathing it where they're rebuilding and also maybe trying to be a playoff team next season. But I definitely think Wiseman raises the ceiling of the Pistons if he's able to be really good. Like I like him. I like what he could potentially be alongside Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey. But also like you have Jalen Duran and like Isaiah Stewart, and it's kind of like a logjam in the front court now with those guys. It's a little weird, but like I'm okay with that for a Pistons team that's still trying to figure out who they want to be around Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey. And just like I said earlier with Luka, is just like taking more and more bites of the apple and being like, okay, now we have Duran and Wiseman, and maybe we get that Wembanyama pick and we get all three of them and just see like who pans out of that group. It's probably going to be Wembanyama, but like just keep taking chances, keep taking on assets. I don't mind that. I just thought you could get a little bit more back for Bay. The next one, the Clippers kind of rebuilt their roster a little bit, especially in the backcourt, shipping out John Wall, Luke Kennard, Reggie Jackson, amongst other things, bringing in Bones Highland, bringing in Mason Plumlee. I like it for them, kind of trying to clear up some of the logjam they had back there. I think Bones Highland is a better, younger piece than any of the stuff they shipped out. Like I'd rather have him than Luke Kennard. They also bring in Eric Gordon, who still shoot a little bit. Nice deal. I don't know, nothing crazy. Like I don't think it's something that this is again like almost the same thing I said with the Lakers. I don't think that remaking your roster around Kawhi Leonard and Paul George automatically makes you a championship contender. I like their team better than I like the Lakers, but it's still they're probably still 4-5 teams in the West that I'm taking over them at this point. And finally, my team, the Sacramento Kings, did nothing, which I know some of the fans are upset about because we're having our best season pretty much since I was 11 years old, which is over 20 years ago at this point, which is kind of crazy to say. I like that we didn't do anything, to be honest. I think there was a couple pieces out there like Plumlee, maybe a couple other like depth guys that they liked but got outbid for, and that's okay. Like this team has a really good thing going on right now. The vibes are really good. They're playing great basketball. They're 32-24 as we sit here on Super Bowl Sunday, third place in the West, which is absolutely insane to me to say still, just like soaking up every minute I can of the season. You remember a couple of years ago, they were playing pretty well going into the trade deadline, and they traded away some of their vets, and it just completely destroyed the chemistry of the team, and the team went straight downhill after that. It was awful. So if there wasn't something you really liked on the table, like a depth piece, I'm okay with doing nothing. I'm glad that we didn't go all in to bring in like a third guy. I think there were some people that were like, yeah, we should trade away some of our young pieces and bring in like an OG Anunoby from the Raptors. I think the future of this team is basically like, okay, you have Fox and you have Sabonis, two guys who made the All-Star team this year. That's the core of your team. And then the ceiling raising part of this team is that the guys you've drafted the last couple seasons, most notably Keegan Murray, who we just drafted 4th overall, and then Davion Mitchell, who was their lottery pick the year before that. You got to develop these guys, and that's going to ultimately be your ceiling raiser. Is that like Harrison Barnes will probably leave at the end of his contract. Keegan Murray will take over that spot. You want Mitchell to develop behind Fox so that you have another ball handler and another piece in the backcourt. And then you're making smaller moves around Fox and Sabonis. I would have absolutely hated to trade away someone like Keegan Murray to bring in like an OG Anunoby, and then we're locked into like Fox, Anunoby, and Sabonis, and like what's the ceiling of that team? I have a lot of questions about that. Like Murray and Mitchell are going to be the ceiling raiser of this team, along with the continued development of De'Aaron Fox, who's been incredible this season. And Sabonis is very deserving of that all-star spot as well. He's been awesome. So like overall, I'm okay with it. I don't want to ruin what we got going on. I don't think now is the time to go all in on another piece. Like if you're bringing in like someone like Kevin Durant and all of a sudden you're a championship contender, that's a little different, but that was never, ever going to happen in Sacramento. I don't think there will ever be a major star like that who's like, trade me to Sacramento, as much as that hurts me to say. So I'm okay. Keep building, keep this super fun team intact. And like, let's keep developing our young guys and like have that be the ceiling raiser. Keep building for the future. I love it. So that is it for me. I will let you guys get back to enjoying your Super Bowl Sunday. As always, Fouled Out can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Cast, Overcast, anywhere you get your podcast. You can hit us up on Twitter at Fouled Out Sports, and you can find Matt on Twitter at Matador_defense. You can find our videos on TikTok at Fouled Out Sports Podcast. It's a long name, but you can't miss it. I think we're in line for a really fun Super Bowl tonight. Like I said on the Super Bowl podcast, I have no idea what's going to happen. I'm just going to root for it to be a good game, and I hope you guys all enjoy it. Matt and I will be back on Wednesday to break down the results of the Super Bowl, what we saw on the field, and then talk about like narratives and moving forward. The week after that, we're going to be talking about the biggest storylines of the NFL offseason. And then we're coming back to NBA stuff, man. I'm super excited. I had a lot of fun doing this podcast today, and I appreciate you guys listening. Bye, guys. Bye, Mom.